Hello and welcome to the Joyful Palette with Helen. I'm Helen and today we're going to be painting this Americana Blooms painting. The brushes we'll be using today are a large flat brush, a small round brush also called a detail brush, and a large round brush. I will be adding some brushes in a little later on, but I will let you know as I do that. Here is the reference photo we will be using for today's painting. And as you can see, this has a more rustic farmhouse feel to it, so we're using more muted tones instead of the bright reds and whites. Here are the colors we'll be using. I have a light blue and a dark blue, so whichever light blue and dark blue you want to use is fine. I think mine's a navy, and I'm not sure the color of the light blue. Then I have two different reds. They're very similar, but the one on the left is a little bit brighter than the one on the right. So as you can see, the one on the right's just a little bit deeper. Then I have a white and a cream color. We won't be using much of the white at all. We'll be using more of the cream. And then I have two different greens. I have a darker green and a little bit lighter green for the highlights. Okay, we're going to start putting in our background. I'm using the large round brush, and I'm just going to pick up a decent amount of light blue paint, and I'm going to start applying it to my background. As you can see, I'm just using some random strokes, and I will be tracing or outlining around a lot of the design, like the flag, the pole. I'm going to outline around that heart in the top right. And I will outline around some of my leaves and flowers at the bottom. So I find that it's just easier to slow down and do an outline around certain parts of the design and then go back in and fill in the rest. So you do what is most comfortable for you, but that is kind of how I do it. So I paused the video here just so you can see I painted over those little swirls at the top. We will go back in and add those in at the end of the painting. Don't forget, your canvas is not glued to your table, so move it and turn it however you need to so that it's most comfortable for you to paint and you don't get a neck ache. Here I'm moving on to the small round or the detail brush in order to get into these smaller areas with the light blue paint. I've switched back to my large round brush and continuing with the light blue paint, I'm going to paint the edges of my canvas. Here I'm just showing you that I'm not going to paint this entirely blue because I am going to carry that red flower over to the edge of my canvas. Okay, we're going to pick up some of the cream color paint for the stars and the numbers, the 250 inside. And then we are going to use a little bit of the dark brown for some shading and to get that rustic look. So I've switched over to my small round or my detail brush, and I zoomed in a little bit here so that you can see me filling in the star with the cream color paint. Don't worry about trying to completely cover your lines at this point because remember, we're going to be going back in later with that dark navy blue. So that is going to take care of any lines that you see. And when you have a rustic painting like this, seeing some of the lines is honestly just adds more character. So don't sweat the small stuff. I want to take a minute here to remind you that as you watch these videos, remember you can always Pause, stop, and rewind as you need to. This should be a relaxing experience. So if you need to pause it because you can't paint as fast as I'm painting, that's perfectly fine. Just enjoy the process. So I told you earlier that I used a couple of different brushes that I didn't show you, and this is one of those brushes. I switched over to about a 1/2 inch flat brush in order to paint in my smaller stripes on the flag. And here I'm just applying that same cream color to the stripes, and I'm turning my canvas because it's just more comfortable. Continue to fill in every other stripe with cream color paint. Now I'm picking up a tiny, tiny amount of dark brown. I'm going to begin to add that into my cream of my stripes. And don't worry too much about this. If you start to apply it and you feel like it's just way too much, you can always pick up some cream and knock it back. You'll actually see me do that here in just a moment. Remember that acrylic paints are very forgiving. Just play around with it until you get it the way you like it. Again, notice that I'm not fretting over covering up those lines completely because we've still got red to add in there, so they're going to get covered up pretty well. So while we have the cream on our palette, we're going to move over to our large round brush again, and I am going to paint in the petals of the center flower with that cream paint. Now I'm going to mix a little bit of dark brown into my cream color to get a little bit of a darker shade to use as the shadow in this cream flower. And I'm just going in, I'm starting at the center of the flower and I'm pulling outward, not going all the way to the end of the petal because you just want that shadow there kind of in the center and about up to the middle of the flower petal. And here I am adding in some to the very tips of the petals because these petals are supposed to kind of curl over at the end. So this is going to help give that effect. Let's mix up some dark red, and we're going to do that by picking up some of our dark green and add it to that darker red tone that I showed you earlier. And you just want to continue adding green until you get a nice deep shade. And I'll show you here in just a moment about where you want to get it to. So here you can see how nice and deep red we got it. And we're going to begin to paint our red flower on the far left. Remember earlier when I didn't paint that part of the canvas in blue? That was because I carried that red flower over the edge of the canvas. Now I'm moving back to that 1/2-inch flat brush, and I'm going to begin to add that same deep red to the rest of my stripes. You may find if you didn't mix enough in the beginning, you're going to have to mix up some more. And don't worry if it's not exactly the same color as your flower. It's okay. It's a rustic farmhouse look, so you're going to have lots of different shades. Remember, turn that canvas as you need to so you don't give yourself a neck ache. I made a little oopsie, so I just picked up a wet wipe and I'm just putting it on the tip of my finger and I'm running my fingernail across and picking up that red paint that I got down into my cream. That's what I love about acrylic paints and wet wipes. They are your best friend when you're painting. Just continue to fill in your red stripes. You might have to switch over to a smaller detail brush to get into those smaller areas. Always remember, smaller area, smaller brush. Switching back to my large round again, and I'm adding another layer of that dark red over that flower, as well as my stripes. Here I am switching over to a small angle brush. I'm going to begin to fill in the top left part of the flag in that dark navy blue, and I'm going to cover up the stitching. It's okay because we're going to add that back in at the end of the painting. And again, I'm just going to talk about outlining or tracing around the edges of your design and then going back in and filling in the inner parts after you've outlined. I just find that this helps cut down on mistakes. So do what works for you, but this is what I found is the best for me. And I'm just going to continue working around the outer edge of this part of the design. And you can see that I'm covering up my TH. Again, we will add that back in a little bit later or at the end of the painting as well. So I'm going to zoom in and show you how I lay my angled brush kind of right along the side of that star. And I just kind of push down a little bit to get my paint on the canvas. And I keep doing that along each edge of the star. And that's kind of how I find it's easiest to keep that star shape, and you don't get into the cream part of the star. So just practice and take your time. It'll take a little bit of practice to get the feel of it, but when you use a smaller angled brush like this, it does make the job much easier. I actually find this detailed work to be very relaxing for me. It forces me to really focus and pay attention to what I'm doing, and I have to just drown everything around me out. So that part of it for me is very relaxing. I hope you find it to be as well. So I'm just going to continue painting around all of these stars and these numbers. I will switch over at some point to my small round or my detail brush to finish up the very end, but I will just speed it up and let you watch. And there you have it. All of the blue is done. And now I'm going to fill that heart in at the top right in with some of the brighter red using my small round brush. I just wanted a little bit of a different red tone from what was in the flag and the flower. I'm going to mix together a mid-tone blue using that dark navy blue mixed in with some of the lighter blue just to get a more muted color. And I'm going to begin to fill in the blue petals. I am using the large round brush again. I'm picking up a little bit more of the darker blue, and I'm going in and adding my shading to the outside of the petals as well as the center of the flower. Again, shading and highlighting are key to making your stuff have more dimension and a little bit more realism. Here, I'm picking up some of the lighter blue and I'm adding it to the very center of the petal for some highlights. It wasn't quite light enough, so I'm actually picking up even more of the lighter blue and I'm going in with another coat. Just keep playing with it and get it to where you like it. Let's move on to the leaves. I'm going to shift back over to my angle brush, and I'm going to pick up some of that dark green, and I'm going to begin to fill in each of my leaves with the dark green, and then I'll be going back in and adding a little bit of the light green for highlighting. I love the angle brush for leaves because you can really use the point of that brush to your advantage. And again, I'm just kind of outlining and then filling in the center. Just going to speed it up, but you can continue to watch me fill in each of my leaves. So I decided I want to play with my blue flower a little bit more. So here I'm just adding in a little bit more of the darker blue, and then I add in a little bit more of the lighter blue. Again, it's your painting. Just have fun and enjoy the process. I'm going to move back to my cream colored flower, and with my 1/2 inch flat brush, I am picking up some darker brown. I didn't like the shadow in this flower. I just felt like it needed to be deeper. So I'm just mixing in a little bit more of that dark brown into my cream paint. And I am working my way around the center of the flower, pulling out towards the middle of the petal. And again, just play around with it. If it's too dark, you can always go back in with some lighter cream. You'll see me do that. But this is just adding more dimension to our flower. Here's where I begin to go back in with some of the cream colored paint again. And you can see I'm kind of holding my brush up and down so that I can get the thin edge of my brush on the canvas. And at other times, I lay it flat. Just play around and get it to where you like it. Your flowers do not need to look exactly like my flowers. Make it your painting. That's what this is all about. Just relaxing and having fun putting paint on canvas. Now we're going to fill in the center of the cream flower with some of our dark brown. I think I'm using my small round brush for this one. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I'm using. And again, I'm just picking up the brown paint and I'm just dabbing it into the center of that flower. Now I'm going to begin to add some of the finer details to the flower, and I'm just taking that brush and I'm very, very gently pulling up between each of the petals to give it some separation and some shadowing. Remember, when you're painting, lighter the pressure, the smaller the line or the space that you're going to be covering. And so if you need to cover more space, then you put more pressure on the brush. But obviously here we're wanting to be very detailed. We're outlining and adding fine lines, so I'm using light pressure. And I'm just going to continue to work around the flower, adding in the separation between the petals. And then you're going to see me actually trace around the outside of the petals too. Don't worry about being precise if you get outside the line of the petal. To me, that just adds character to your painting. Do not try to be perfect. So again, can you see how my outlines are not perfect? They're a little messy, a little wonky, but that is my favorite way to paint. Let's add the center to our blue flower, and we're going to use straight navy or dark blue to get the center of this flower. You always want your centers to be much darker than the rest of your flower to give it that dimension. Now I'm going to pick up black and I'm going to add that to the center of my red flower. If you look at your reference photo, you'll see that the little dots around the cream flower center are that navy blue color. So I'm taking my detail brush, picking up just a very small amount of paint, and I'm lightly dabbing in some of these blue dots in my cream flower. Let's paint the flagpole, and I'm using my small round detail brush and black paint, and I'm just filling in the line. As you can see, I'm not putting a lot of pressure because remember, the more pressure you put, the fatter your line is going to be. So just laying in a little bit of black paint, and then I'm going to go back over that with a little bit of white as well for the highlights. I like to add the white while the black is still wet so that you can get a little bit of gray and a little bit of white, so it's not just all one color. And now I'm going to add a little bit of black around the outside of the top of the flagpole. And again, then I'm going to go back into the center with white, and I'm going to make almost a gray color. Now it's time to add some highlights to the red flower. You want to make sure that your base is fully dry before you do this. And I just mixed together some of the bright red and some of our yellow paint. This is going to give you a really bright red color. If you mix red and white together, you're going to get pink, and that's not what you want for this painting. So mix together the bright red and some yellow, and then add it to each of the petals. Kind of, you can see I'm just doing the center. So I'm not taking it all the way to the very center of the flower, and I'm not taking it all the way to the end of the petal. You might have to do this more than once to get it the way you like it. That dark background can be a little bit hard to cover. So if you have to go back in with a second layer, then that's what you have to do. But just get it to wherever you like it and call it good. Don't forget to turn that brush in different directions. Here I'm holding it straight up and down to get the thin edge of the brush, and I'm pulling up smaller streaks of those highlights. Now I'm going back in with some even deeper red color. So I've mixed together, I think for this, I mixed together some red and green, and I probably added a little bit of brown to it as well to get a nice deep color. And I'm outlining each of these red petals, and you're going to see that I add in those fine lines between the petals to give them separation. I'm going to move over to the blue flower, and I'm going to do the same thing over here using my navy blue mixed with a little bit of black to get an even darker color. And I'm going to outline each of my petals, and I'm going to add those thin lines between the petals for separation. You guessed it, now it's time to do the same thing to our leaves. So I've taken some of my dark green, mixed in just a little bit of black so that I could get it darker than the dark green base of the flowers. Using that small round brush, I am just adding an outline around the flower, and then I'm pulling in just a small line in the center of each flower. Now I am going in with my straight light green, and I'm adding in a couple highlights to each leaf. This is what gives your painting life. We're going to now put some lines in between each of our flag stripes. We're going to use that same deep reddish brown color that we used to outline the red flower with. And you're just going to pick up a little bit of paint and paint in between each of those stripes. And again, it does not have to be perfectly straight. The more wonky you get it, the more character your painting is going to have. Trust me on this. Now we're going to add in the little dots on the inside of the flowers. And I'm just using the opposite end of my small round brush. And I'm just picking up some white paint and I'm just adding a few dots. And then I am putting my tip of my brush into those dots and I'm dragging in towards the center. Now I'm going to add in the smaller dots around the center of the flower. And this is going to be done with the back of the brush again. Just pick up a little bit of white paint. And when you initially put the first dot down, it's going to be larger. If you keep adding those dots without picking up more paint, they will get smaller. So just do various sizes. It's going to look much more realistic if they're not all the same shape. For the cream color flower, I'm just using a combination of yellow and dark brown. I dipped my brush into each one and added my dots. And then for the red flower, I'm moving back over to the white and I'm going to add my dots, drag it in towards the center, and then add my smaller dots. Now we're going to add our stitching back in. And here I'm going to use a Posca pen. Posca is just a brand. It's an acrylic paint pen. And this is in a cream color. So I'm just going to add in short little dash marks around the outside edge of this blue section to get my stitch marks. Don't worry if you don't have a pen like this, you can just use your cream paint, your small round brush, and just put small dash marks with the cream paint. It's totally okay. Using a white Posca pen, I'm going to add back in these swirls around the red heart at the top. And then I'm going to go over that with white paint. You don't have to use the pen part of this. If you don't have a Posca pen, it's okay. You can just use your detail brush with some white paint. I just found it was easier to trace my design back in with the pen and then go over it with the white paint and a small brush. You'll see here how adding the white paint over it just makes it brighter and stand out more. I could have added multiple coats with the paint pen, but I just thought this would be quicker. I decided to add another coat of that bright red onto this because I could see a little bit of the canvas through it. There you have it. Except at this point, I realized I forgot to add the TH when I was doing this video. So I took my Posca pen after this was over and I added the TH in, but you can always just take your small round brush with some cream paint as well. Here I'm just showing you a close-up of some of the detail of the painting. I really hope you enjoyed this painting as much as I did. I would love it if you do this painting, if you would take a picture of it and send it to me. I love to see my customers and their paintings.